So I know that you're so excited to get back into the subjunctive. So we're going to dive a little deeper with el subjuntivo con verbos de emoción. And as you can probably gather, that means subjunctive with verbs of emotion. And my flash is a little bright, but you get the idea. In order to remember how the subjunctive works, we're going to do a quick recap. So the first thing I think we should discuss is how to conjugate verbs in the subjunctive. It's a 3-step process, as you recall. The first step is to put the verb in the yo form. The second step is to drop the o from that yo form. Third step is to add the opposite ending. When we say the opposite ending, we mean opposites are AR verbs being the opposite of ER IR verbs. So if we want to conjugate a verb in the subjunctive that's an AR verb, we're going to borrow the endings from the ER IR verbs. So the opposite endings for AR verbs are es, emos, ace, and en. For ER-IR verbs, we're going to borrow the AR verb endings. So we have as, amos, ice, and an. Of course, a tense in Spanish wouldn't be a tense in Spanish if it didn't have some irregulars. And the way we remember our irregulars in Spanish for the subjunctive is the word dishes. These verbs are dar, ir, ser, haber, estar, and saber. I'll give you the yo form of these just to recap so you remember them. Dar is de, ir, vaya, ser, sea, haber, haya, estar, esté, and saber, sepa. So when do we use this subjunctive thing? So we're going to look for phrases at the beginning of a sentence that trigger us to use the subjunctive in the second part of the sentence. So these phrases, in order to remember them, we're going to use the word weirdo. So we've talked about some of these words. We've talked about recommendations. We've talked about ojalá. We've talked about impersonal statements. And today we're going to focus on the emotions part. For future reference, this is for wishes and wants, and this is for doubt or denial. The next thing we need to consider is how we form a sentence in the subjunctive. So the first thing we're looking for is one of those phrases that we saw with weirdo. All right, this will be our first subject. It's our main clause or our independent clause. There will be verbs conjugated. The verbs here will be conjugated in the indicative. Next, we have our magical word that connects both the clauses. This is always going to be the word que. And when we see our main clause that includes a phrase from weirdo, and then the second thing after that is que, we know that this part is going to require that the verb be conjugated in the subjunctive for our second subject. I think it's pretty obvious, but I just want to cover. Verbs of emotion are verbs that indicate that you feel something. So some examples of these are temer or temo que. Similarly to temer as tengo miedo. Okay. Now the opposite end of the spectrum, alegro, it makes me happy. Now kind of going back, me molesta. Me sorprende, something that surprises you, causes you to have an emotion. Siento que, feel something, you feel that something. If you think that something's sad, es triste. Okay. Okay, so if you see any of these verbs of emotion followed by the word que, it requires that your second subject in the second part of your sentence be conjugated in the subjunctive. All right, so to recap, I want to show you an example of how to put this into practice. So when I got a cat, many of you were surprised that you saw that I had a cat. So a lot of you said, it surprises me that you have a cat. So let's use this to practice our subjunctive. So our first sentence, our main clause is going to be conjugated in the present indicative. And if you remember from the last whiteboard, we had it surprises me. Me sorprende. It surprises me. The next thing we need is our magical connector word that we have in every subjunctive sentence. Me sorprende que. And now we're going to move on to our second subject, our dependent clause or subordinate clause. So me sorprende que. We have our second subject, you or to. The word for have is tener. So I'm going to put it in the yo form. Tengo. I drop the O and I add the opposite ending. Que tengas un gato.